to another program on development at work with Audreyanna Thomas. And on this program, we'll be discussing a number of areas. So we'll be talking about the family and developing the family industry. So, and we look at the business of the family and the family economic development planning. So we're going to look at family economic development planning, succession planning, ancestral and family land matters, etc. So essentially, we're going to talk about the family, and we're going to talk about developing the family as an industry. And what do I mean by that? What do I mean by developing the family as an industry? So families have people make up families. And so people with skills make up families. And so we're going to talk about how we can take those skills which family members have and transform those skills and the family members in terms of their numbers into an industry. An industry meaning that an industry that can ensure the economic development of families, or I would say sustainable economic development of families. And we're also going to talk about succession planning. So we can't just live and then we die and we just live like that. So we live and we die, we live and we die. Life should not be like that. So we're going to, because after we pass away, so to speak, or after we leave this earth, we should leave a level of order. And so I'm going to talk about the importance of succession planning in families and the importance of having structure and order in our families. So in a country like Guyana, it is very easy for the gap between the rich and the poor to widen, especially now that Guyana is an oil and gas producing country. And it's more or less survival of the fittest. And so if we're going to, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, the theme is leaving no one behind. But in a country like Guyana, as an emerging oil and gas production and exporting country, it is very easy to leave people behind, or to leave large numbers of people behind, to leave the poor behind. And so very often we wait on the government to solve all of our problems or to come up with the solutions to solve our problems. What Building Our Dream Guyana movement is about, what the development at work is about, it's about helping you to build your own dream village, to build your own dream family, to build your own dream community, to build your own dream village. And I'm going to, in one of my programs, or a few of my programs, I'm going to be dealing with building partnerships and alliances and coalitions and the science and the art around building partnerships, building coalitions, building alliances for development, for economic development, for sustainable development. And so we're going to, so what can you do to ensure that your family has or experience sustainable economic development? You notice that I haven't necessarily put it in the context of generational wealth. And because I'm going to, but really that is what I'm talking about. It's also about generational wealth. I wanted to deal with that separately, but I think that developing the family as an industry is linked to generational wealth. And so when I talk about developing the family as an industry, it's really getting down to the business of the family and treating family members as having various roles and responsibilities as it relates to developing the family as an industry. So, for example, over the past weeks, I've been discussing some of the, for example, skills development. If we're going to develop the family as an industry, then families need skills, family members need skills. So one of the programs that I've been promoting is the Every Citizen a Resource program, whereas we're promoting that every family member should have 3 skills from which you can earn. And so what are your 3 skills from which you can earn? And so sit with your family and discuss with them what are your 3 skills that you can earn from, or develop what are the 3 skills that you would like to get training in, so that you can be more skilled, so to speak, and you can earn from various skill sets, so to speak. So that's one. So one is education and training. And the second one is in terms of families make up villages also. So we're talking about developing a service industry in communities. How can your family play a greater role? Because I do know that families are already playing a role in as a part of the village economy. So how can your family play a greater role in developing a service industry in your village, in your community? And the idea is that it's about how to build economic and financial stability into your family, with you being control over that process, or even program, we can say. So the other aspect is how can you become more economically and financially independent as a family? And so I'm working with some families and communities, and I'll tell you about some of the programs we're working on, and you might be interested in developing some of these programs also for your family. So we're looking at, I've discussed this before, developing an family development fund. And how do you develop a family development fund? You can have a fund where, for example, you can go to the bank, and I know outside of an organization, maybe if you, I'm not sure in terms of an organization how you may want to do this as a family, but I know if you don't have an organization, like a company or I was going to say, I'm thinking in terms of a company you can have, or a trust, some kind of organizational arrangement, like a company or a trust. Then you can also have about three persons in your family who you trust. And I would recommend at least 3. So they can open an account at the bank, and every month family members can contribute X amount to that family development fund. And that family development fund can be used for various purposes. So let's say every month families put, let's say, $50. Every member of the family put 50 US dollars, that's 10,000 Guyana dollars, into a family development fund that's in a bank account. And that money, you can agree that that money can be used as startup funding to let's say family members want to start small businesses. That money can be used as startup fund, as funds for a startup business. You can also use that money. The families I'm working with, they have developed two interesting programs. One is a family unemployment fund or a family unemployment program, where family members who are unemployed in that family, they're going to have a fund that can provide a stipend for family members who are unemployed for a period of 6 months. So it is expected that within that period of 6 months, family members should be able to, who are unemployed, should be able to get jobs. If they don't get a job within that 6 months, then I guess it's going to be up to the consideration of the family or families to decide how and whether they will extend the unemployment support. So that's one thing that you can do within your family to build economic and financial stability into your family, to build economic and financial independence into your family. So another program that we're working on is a family pension program. So in the families I'm working with, some of the families I'm working with, they have a family pension program. And under this pension program, they are giving the elders in their family who are over a certain age. In this case, those family members who are over 70 years, they are giving them a stipend, a monthly stipend. And that stipend, they can get that stipend monthly, they can get it quarterly, half yearly, or yearly. So that is one way of taking care of the elders in your family, the unemployed in your family, and to do it with dignity. And the reason I am promoting the programs is because very often we help people in our families, but it's dependent on our own individual interests and decisions. And very often, sometimes, I usually say to some people, help people and keep your mouth shut, right? And so we are, and very often, sometimes it's not done with dignity. So, and so with a program, then it's a way of helping family members in a more dignified way, because it's sort of it's a planned way of family financial and economic support, of providing providing economic and financial support to family members. It is a structured way, and it is also a dignified way. The other program that some families are working on is or some families can work on. I'm not working with any family as yet on this program, but I do know that people are involved in programs such as these. Is a family scholarship fund, because education is very, very important. And when we get to, we're going to look at how you can progress from poverty to growth to prosperity. And we're going to look at a sort of, to use a big word, continuum, but a process. So we are going to look at a process. And so a scholarship fund, for example, you may have, and this is something I'm thinking of also when I work with families and communities. So we're supporting communities to develop sustainable development and economic development plan for communities, for villages. And this is where you can even have that for families. And under that, you can have an education program and an education fund, education and training. And you can have a scholarship fund there. So and this is part of your family development plan, could be that you would like to at least get a lawyer in the family. So if you'd like to get a lawyer in your family, at least one lawyer in your family, at least one doctor or um medical for somebody with medical knowledge in your family. You may want to have to fund and studying law is expensive. So you may have a scholarship fund, and within your family, every year you can identify persons who have the ability and who have an interest, family members, in studying law. And so that the family can have a fund to support that person to become an attorney at law. Again, we call them attorney at law. In other places, they call them they have different names. They have a barrister of law at law, solicitors. But an attorney at law in our context is someone who is a barrister at law. The barrister at law is the person who represents the client in court, and they're also a solicitor. And the solicitor is the person who drafts the pleadings, etc., etc. And so the Attorney General Chambers, for example, we have the state solicitor, right? The state solicitor is someone who drafts legal documents. And the attorney at law combines both the barrister and the at law and the solicitor expertise. So you may want to, that's just a little bit of additional knowledge. So you may want to, in your family, you may want to have that education fund, or the development fund can also support a scholarship program, an education program. And then you can have, you can also, and also skills training, for example. So one of the things I plan to do with some of the families I'm working with, and it's for us to have a list of, let's say, over a period of 5 years, who are the persons in your family who will be writing CXC, for example. And after they write CXC or CSEC, this is the Caribbean Secondary Education Council examination. So after they write that exam, maybe you can, as a part of that fund, could be to support those persons in your family who would like to go on to university. Some of them may want to go on to the technical institutes. But the idea is to have a planned education program. So you'll have an idea, 3 persons in our families or 5 persons in our family will be writing the CSEC exam or would have written the CSEC exam in 2026. And so, and 2 of them would like to go on to university. 3 of them would like to go on to do technical training. This is either to the Guyana Technical Institute, the Government Technical Institute, sorry, or to the other technical institutes. We have the Guyana Industrial Training Center, which is the GITC. But the idea is to have discussions in your family to about education and about the interests of the young people in your family as it relates to furthering their education and developing their skills. There's some of them who may want to go on to university, but they would like to do some technical training before. And so don't let's sit and wait for the government to do everything. There are some things that we sit and wait for the government to do that we should be doing for ourselves and for our families. So have a plan for your family. That's the idea. The reason why some people come out of poverty faster or develop experience growth faster, they're able to prosper faster, is because they have a plan. Let me ask you a question. If you get 5 million Ghana dollars today, what's your plan for it? What are you going to do with it? Do you have a plan as to what you're going to do with it? So do you have, so you need a plan for your family. And the other aspect that I'd like to deal with is as it relates to, so we dealt with education, we dealt with, we talk a bit about the development fund and what the development fund can be used for. We talked also about the family pension program, the family unemployment program. And we also, now we can also talk about developing a microfinance scheme for your family. And so that microfinance scheme can be a part of that family development fund where you're able to support family members who would like to start businesses. And so that microfinance scheme can focus on, for example, providing startup funding for small businesses in your family. But the idea is, and as a part of this program, we're saying to people that by 2030, whichever government wins the election in 2030, if your government does not, if your party does not win, you must not be waiting for your party to win to get a job. So what this program is about, it's about self-reliance. It's about individual independence, economic and social independence, and how we can help you to build your dream life. We all have dreams, and sometimes we sit and wait on the government to help us to realize our dreams. This program is about how can we inspire you, motivate you, get you to reconceptualize your life, reimagine your life, your village, your community, and what you can do to help your village to realize the dream of the village, the dream of the community, your family, help your family to realize their dreams, and how you can realize your dreams also and build your dream life. And I'm using the word here, build, very deliberately because it's building. Sometimes we think that things happen magically, but very few things in life happen by magic. So and what I find sometimes, people have a superficial understanding and approach to success. And one of the reasons why people are losing, they're not winning, is because they have a superficial understanding and approach to winning and to success. And this is where one of the things I keep saying on this program is that every church should have an economic development plan for your members. Every mosque, every temple should have an economic development plan for members. And so and so I'm going to shift now to the succession planning. part of what I've said earlier also is also linked to succession planning. So you put a process in place for your family to move from one level to the next, to build. This generation might not have done certain things, but how can the next generation do more than the generation before them? And how can you put measures and processes in place for the generation after to do better than the generation before them? So we're also thinking generational. I have and when you come from a family like mine, my family, we have a 200-year history of generational, what I can call it, growth, identity, understanding, and I realized that it's important. It's important to have a generational understanding of life, and to see life and living as beyond this our current existence, both socially and economically. And so and that's why I've been saying to go to the insurance companies and find out how you can have life insurance. If you're self-employed, find out how you can have life insurance. Some insurance companies, you can have a life insurance with a pension plan and a savings. So go to the insurance companies and find out. Insurance companies, I'm saying, go to communities, go to villages and share some of the services that you're offering. We're talking about building economic and financial stability and independence into families. And so succession planning, for example, what is your plan for what happens after you, let's say, leave this earth? What is your plan? And so one of the things we need to include in our families is a higher level of order and structure as it relates to our current existence and what happens if we are no longer here on this earth, so to speak. So succession planning is absolutely important. And this brings me to land. And we're going to deal with land matters. Many African Guyanese families are experiencing and have been experiencing a lot of confusion. And I could tell you major confusion as it relates to land matters. And and very often it seems impossible to sort these matters out. I've been dealing with land matters and family for about 30 years. And I can tell you that, and so in a way, it's 3 decades of having that experience of dealing with family and land and the different issues. And what I realize is important is planning while we're here and planning for if we're not here. Meaning that if we leave this earth, or when we leave this earth, because we all have to go at some time, at some point. So let's come to land matters and African Guyanese and land matters. So I am currently, like I said, I am currently doing having worked with land and family matters and land for the past 30 years. And having experienced myself and seen the issues and the complexities of finding solutions, I am currently trying to to do my PhD in land and social policy in law, so to speak, PhD in law, and to do my research. I'm doing my research in land and social policy. But what I am currently doing, what I've been doing for the past years, 30 years, will form a huge part of my research. And so I'd like to share this with you. You know, very often we say that African Guyanese don't like to leave wills. They don't like to do wills. But what I've discovered is that they from my research during the late, but African Guyanese, as you know, their history with land and land ownership is from when slavery was abolished in 1838. When slavery was abolished in 1838, African Guyanese started to own land from around 1840. So from 1840 onwards, African Guyanese had started to own land, and this is to own land with legal titles. So they were able to purchase abandoned sugar estates, and not just sugar estates. There were sugar plantations, coffee plantations, and there were, for example, the village that I am from at Coverdon. Coverdon was not a sugar plantation. Coverdon was a coffee plantation. And so so they were able to purchase the freed Africans. They purchased the sugar plantations, but they also purchased coffee plantations. I know that there were other plantations too, but I just need to double check that information before I don't want to say it and then I have not. For example, I was going to say cotton plantations, but I'd like to go and double check where those plantations were. So the ex-slaves African Guyanese, they started to own land from the 1840s. For example, I know at Coverdon, the first set of lands were owned in Coverdon by transports from 1841. And I know that, like I said, that I've been doing this research for a while. For like 30 years, I've been doing land and family and ancestral land, family land, ancestral land, and research. And so from the 1841, ex-slaves in Coverdon were started to own land by transports. With transports, they had transports. And then in other villages, some of the villages on the East Coast, like East Coast of Demerara, like Victoria, right? Ex-slaves bought villages like Victoria collectively. So African Guyanese have a history of owning, collectively purchasing abandoned plantations, not just sugar plantations, and and also individual ex-slaves or individual African Guyanese families bought portions of plantations. And so the history of land ownership for African Guyanese dates back to the 1840s. So at some point, I'm going to tell you their connection with the land ownership of African Guyanese to the various laws which were enacted, which were established. So The laws were some of the land, the laws and regulations in relation to land were established. And there's a pattern that after those laws and regulations were established, then British Guyana issued land titles to African Guyanese, whether it was as a collective in terms of purchasing villages or individual African Guyanese. So the history of African Guyanese and land dates back to land ownership, dates back to the 1840s. And then there is, but what I have found is that through the years, for one reason or the other, African Guyanese have not been kept up to date with the ownership of land by their ancestors. And so there's a huge gap in terms of knowledge, let's say current knowledge of African Guyanese in terms of the history of land ownership, whether it be for their families, for the communities of which they're a part of. There's a huge gap in terms of knowledge. And the other thing I find is that and that knowledge is, the Bible says, for the lack of knowledge, my people perish. And so many African Guyanese families are perishing for the lack of knowledge in terms of that understanding and knowledge and understanding of the history of their ancestors in terms of land ownership. And that lack of understanding and knowledge can be exploited and is being exploited. And hence, I'm hoping that this research that I am doing, it would be able to help, or it would give me the credibility and the certification to assist African Guyanese, but also to engage the institutions as it relates to bridging this gap so that African Guyanese can benefit economically from their ancestral lands. So also what I found during the course of my research is that, coming back to where I said that very often we hear that African Guyanese don't like to write wills, and they don't like they don't necessarily pass on some kind of structure or order as it relates to ownership of land to the next generation. But I have found during the course of my research is that during the 1800s and the early 1900s, African Guyanese, there was a culture, a dominant culture, I would say, of African Guyanese leaving wills. And I would even say, so although I'm still in the process of doing my research, I can say at this stage that what I found is that there was a dominant culture of African Guyanese leaving wills for their family members from I would say, during the 1800s, and would have been during the late 1800s to the early 1900s. And even early and late 1900s, I would say. But in terms of speaking predominantly, it would be the late 1800s, early 1900s. And so it was quite a discovery. And so how can we, but then I don't want to tell you everything about my research now, because then it would be disclosing all of my findings, one, without fully testing some of them, because some of them I'd still like to test them, and without also well, I wouldn't say verifying, because the sources of the research and the information are authentic and genuine sources. So in terms of verification, I can say that I found that there was a dominant culture of African Guyanese landowners writing wills in the late 1800s, early to mid 1900s. It continued after the 1900s, but I'm still to test to see whether it happened. Writing wills was done in a less deliberate way in the late 1900s than it was in the late 1800s and early 1900s. So it's quite an interesting research that I'm doing. And it's an attempt to find solutions, structured solutions, scientific solutions to the issues of African Guyanese and land, and how we can solve some of these issues that we have that African Guyanese are experiencing in relation to land and ancestral lands, and how this generation can address, confront, and resolve some of those problems for the next generation. And so that the next generation does not have to deal with some of these issues. Because I'll tell you why it's important for these issues to be addressed in this generation. And I use the word confront, right? So I'm trying to get the information, put it in some kind of structured form in terms of a research. And I said, and for African Guyanese families, organizations to confront, to address. And I use the word confront deliberately, because remember I said that African Guyanese, I find, sometimes have a superficial understanding and approach to winning and to success. And what is absent in that, and why it's superficial, is because there are a number of things that we know what we want, we know what is happening. We know that we need to address the land issues, or the family land issues, the ancestral land issues. We know that. But somehow to move from that knowledge and understanding to action, to making a decision, to decision making, and then to move from there to finding solutions which would ensure that the next generation of African of descendants or of African Guyanese who own land, these ancestral lands, that generation is able to benefit in a substantial way from the lands, and that the land is able to help them to move out of poverty into growth and prosperity. And so another aspect is, and so we have to confront the realities in terms of addressing these gaps and these difficulties, these challenges in relation to ancestral lands, African Guyanese ancestral lands and family lands. So The other aspect, the other point I'd like to make is that if those matters are not addressed in this generation, then the next generation would not even have the knowledge or the historical background, the historical knowledge to resolve some of these issues. Because let's take, for example, if the land was, let's say, transported in the 1840s, the title holders would have been from the 1840s. So from the 1840s to 2026, we're talking here about 8 or 9 generations. So if we say 20 years is a generation, in our context, I would be, if we look at from 1840s, that would be, I might be like a 7th or 8th generation. So the next generation would be, the 8th generation. Now, 8th generation down the line from 1840s to 2026, the names of the landowners they can't connect with that, because the names of change over the years as people marry, as people take their mother's name or their father's names. All these things have implications as it relates to the knowledge of African Guyanese ancestral land ownership coming from the 1840s. And in some cases, the title holders were never changed from the 1840s. And so there's also, I'm going to get to trust in a minute. I'm going to get to, and this is why, like I said to you, one of the reasons I'm doing I am trying to do the PhD program. I'm still going through the process of applying for the program, but I am still, what I like about doing a PhD research is that you don't necessarily start the research when you're accepted to the university to do the program. You can build on work that you've already been doing in that research. So one of the things that I'm hoping is to, I'll come to trust in a minute, but it's that the research would help me to get the credibility, some additional credibility, because I already work with families, but also the certification to be able to work with institutions such as the Guyana Lands and Surveys Commission, such as the Attorney General Chambers and the Ministry of Legal Affairs in terms of reforms, to work with the organizations such as the Probate and Administration, right? Probate and Administration falls under the Attorney General Chambers, and anyway. So this research will help to, I will help to give me that credibility to be able to hopefully impact institutional, administrative, and possibly judicial reform as it relates to the country dealing with African Guyanese ancestral land and land ownership. So I'm excited about this research work that I'm doing, and I'm excited, and I'm even more excited about the solutions that we can have. Having worked in development for a number of years, I am keen on poverty reduction and poverty reduction processes and measures, and land is a key element for poverty reduction, land and land ownership. But as it relates to African Guyanese and ancestral lands and family lands, it's a complicated and complex, and even I would say, and even to some extent confusing matter. And I can say that having, with some authority, having been so intricately involved in ancestral lands and family lands and land matters and land ownership, etc. Having been extensively involved also in legal matters as it relates to land and family land. I've spent, for the past 30 years, I've been extensively and involved in cases as it relates to family land and land matters in the courts. And so I'm bringing that, the experience, to help us to solve to help us to find solutions. And the other thing, so succession planning is important as it relates to land matters. Writing wills, that is an important thing. You have to write, if you once you own certain property and other things, I would say that you should you should leave a will. So what you're leaving is not just a will, it's a level of order that you're leaving if, God forbid, you pass away. So I hope that I can have some lawyers on the program who would be able to explain to you more from the law as it relates to wills and preparing and writing wills. So, and it's not that when you write a will you will die, you know. That's not necessary. So you can once you start to achieve and acquire things, you should have write a will so that you're able to leave behind your this is what you are desiring to be done, to happen with your property, with your things that you're leaving behind, with your finances. What am I talking about? I'm talking about building more order and structure into families and ensuring that that order and structure goes on, lives on beyond you. It is passed on from generation to generation. That will also forms a part of the legal documents as it relates to what you own. But part of the challenge with African Guyanese and African Guyanese descendants of landowners writing wills is that you can really only write a will, and lawyers, you can correct me, I'm subject to correction. But you can only write a will for what you own. If I borrow your car and you have allowed me to use your car for a year, I can't put your car in my will. The registration is in your name. And so in terms of ancestral lands, this land is owned by so many people, hundreds of people, and hundreds of unborn descendants also. So, and that has its legal issues. And I can tell you that, like I said, for the past 30 years, I've been dealing with some of those legal issues. And the challenges and the difficulties. It's okay, perhaps to some extent, until you get to the court and you realize that there are so many challenges. and so many difficulties in terms of when you get to the court, even in terms of representing the ancestral land, even in terms of the representation and who qualifies to represent this ancestral land. So we need to get our house in order, African Guyanese who are descendants of landowners. There's another aspect that I'd like to, in the course of my research, that I've discovered. And I've discovered that very often we say that, and I'll end on this note, young people are not interested in agriculture. Young people are moving away from the lands. And agriculture used to be a big thing generations ago. But what I'm discovering from my research is that I still need to test this theory a little more, but I think I have discovered enough information to share it at this stage as a preliminary conclusion, if I could put it this way. So what I've discovered is that, yes, there have been changes in terms of there are more opportunities for employment. Guyana has moved from being an agrarian society or an agricultural society primarily to being now, we have a number of different different industries and business ventures in addition to agriculture. And now we have oil and gas. And so these are all reasons. We can find a lot of reasons why young people are not interested in agriculture. But what I've also found, and I think the FAO might be interested in what I'm about to say, the FAO and organizations like ICO, I think it's the Institute of Agriculture Corporation, something to that effect. But what I've found is that many African Guyanese descendants who are descendants of land owners, when the land is when the title holders, there was a higher level of comfort in terms of landowners or the title holders engaging in agricultural practices. So young people, while they have a right to the land, they're not the title holders. And so one of the things that we can explore, and this is definitely something I'd like to explore with African Guyanese and African Guyanese who are descendants of ancestral lands, family lands, is whether agriculture and the interest in agriculture will increase if current generation of descendants of African Guyanese landowners, if they become title holders. Would they, it's just a question, like I said, I am still exploring this, or examining rather this, but I'm sharing with you a theory that I have, that if young Guyanese of young African Guyanese of who are descendants of ancestral lands, family lands, if they become title holders, would their interest in agriculture increase? Would their interest, because now this would be your land. You own this portion of land where you're doing your farming. Because in many cases, the land is owned by hundreds of people, tens of people. and everybody may have their little spot. But then because there isn't the title ownership, anybody can also come and claim your spot. So in terms of the continuity, or everybody may have, don't let me say everybody have, everybody may have. So in terms of the interest, and in terms of, because if someone is involved in agriculture, then they would be required to expend significant amount of investment in that um, agricultural venture. So so there must be some kind of structure in African families in terms of that will give a greater younger people a greater degree of comfort that they can invest significant sums in this portion of the family land, the ancestral land, that now become theirs, because it is now owned by them, and they're not going to be challenged by other family members for it. Now I'm doing real talk here with you, right? There's a saying, he who feels it knows it. And so I think I have the authority at many levels to have this discussion with you. We're having a family discussion. You bring your family around the table and we have this serious discussion, serious talk we're having with families. And this is why I said that we have a superficial, sometimes, understanding and approach to winning and success. But in order to win, we need structure, we need a plan. We may need to make hard decisions, tough decisions. Or else we will continue to look at, and then we say, oh, this person is progressing faster, this person is progressing faster. But sometimes when we look at what African Guyanese have, if African Guyanese are able to organize themselves around their what they have, God said to Moses, what is it you have in your hand? Moses said, a rod. And everything Moses did, or most of the miracles that Moses performed, he did it with the rod. That is what he had in his hand. And so African Guyanese, who are descendants of landowner of lands, family lands, whether they be family lands or ancestral lands, what is it that you have in your hand that can bring about sustainable economic development for your families? You have the land. And so you have to be able to make tough decisions and live with the consequences of your decisions. Or we've noticed in many cases, the young people have moved away from these lands. They've moved away. That is because they very often people say, I want problems. I want no family problems. I want deal with me family as it relates to land, because land can be a major issue of family conflicts. Major issue as it relates to family conflicts. But I am hoping that, but there's always a solution to every problem. To every problem, there's a solution. And sometimes we have to make tough decisions. And so I'm proposing that, I'm still saying that it's a theory that I have that needs to be tested, whether young people in the African Guyanese community, descendants of ancestral and family lands, whether they would become increasingly interested or more interested in agriculture if they're able to become title holders and landowners of the family and ancestral lands. So think about what I've said. This is also going to be a part of my research, and because agriculture is linked to land. Yes, we're doing hydroponics, and we're doing the shade houses, and we're doing other forms of agriculture, but still, to some extent, we still need land for agriculture. Agriculture is heavily linked to land. And the level of investment would depend on the level of ownership, the level of entitlement as it relates to that land. Because, for example, you can't borrow a loan from the bank if you don't have some degree of ownership, legal entitlement to the land. So you can't get a loan to develop your agriculture, to build a nice home, to upgrade your business. And so to some extent, African Guyanese, my question is, are we keeping ourselves back economically because we're not confronting the many issues as it relates to ancestral and family lands? And so I'm going to leave that discussion there. We're at program time. It's program time at this point, and so I'm going to leave it there for this program. But I'm going to come back to deal with this matter, and I'd like you to seriously process what I have said as it relates to all of the various areas and succession planning, developing the family as an industry, the business of the family, and then we can, if you would like to invite me to your community, I'm going to put my number to your community, or to have discussions with community leaders, because I'm hoping that these programs can be community-led, family-led. So I'm going to put my number in the chat. And like I said, that this program is about bringing the technical expertise together to provide you with technical information as a part of our Building Our Dream Guyana movement, to help you to build your dream village, to build your dream communities, to build your dream families, and to build your dream life. And so I have some of my colleagues and friends who are technical experts in various areas. They're going to be joining me at various points so that we can provide you with information. Communities and villages need technical, and they need technical leadership, not just technical support, but technical leadership. I'm writing my number in the chat and my email. My number is 592-694-5585. That's my telephone number, and my email is tomogy@yahoo.com. THOMOGY@yahoo.com. So I end by saying to you that one of the reasons why we are not progressing as fast as we should, one of the reasons why the gap as it relates to the rich and the poor in Guyana is widening is because in many cases at the family and the community level, we are not organized or as organized as we should be. We need more structure. And so this program, we're going to help you to become more organized and to build more structure into your family and into your village and your community, and how we do community development and how we do family. It was a pleasure. I am Audreyanna Thomas, and it is a pleasure. It was a pleasure doing this program. And I love development. And I'll share one last thing with you. I'm reading this book that is, the name of the book is Crazy Faith by Pastor Michael Todd. And he says that it's only crazy until it happens. And so there are times when we think that, oh, the ideas we have, the dreams we have, it's so crazy. But I'm saying to you, it's only crazy until it happens. Once again, it was a pleasure doing this program. And you take care. And I'll be back again on the program on Tuesday at 7 p.m. and next Tuesday at 7 p.m. And we'll be dealing with community development, developing an environmental industry and the service industry in Guyana. Goodbye.